Well, hi Andy. I just wanted to bring you a few words on this special kind of celebration. Firstly, I want to thank you. Well, actually, I want to thank you for a number of things. I want to thank you for your friendship over 30 years that has meant a great deal to me as we were youth leaders and then church leaders and now still being friends. I'm really grateful for your friendship. Thank you too for your faithfulness. Over all these years, you've been faithful to the call of God, faithful to the church there in Odium. You've been a great example to the rest of us in terms of faithfulness in ministry, in marriage, and in life, actually. And I really want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for keeping your sense of humour throughout all this time as well, through the changes of New Frontiers, the way you've navigated that and handled that so well. Thank you for being the pioneer that you've been as well. I really appreciate your fellowship in both planting the church in Farnham, planting the church into Basingstoke, and now the other pioneering initiatives that you've been involved with. I'm just so grateful and full of admiration for you. So Andy le Roux, thank you so much for your friendship, and I look forward to the next decades together.
One of the characteristics I like about Andy is his endless and consistent positivity. He has such a can-do attitude. No mountain is too high. Talking of mountains, he once took me up a mountain in the Lake District, which I think he described as a small hill. It was a 450-metre high peak, Cat Bells, near Keswick. I began to think it was his first assassination attempt on me. In fact, Andy planned a day of activities as our paths crossed while on holiday, and although he exhausted us all, it was an absolute highlight of our trip. It's quite an achievement to work anywhere for 30 years, and really unusual these days. Andy's one of those people who could have done anything, and so God chose the best when Andy was called on to serve the Vine Church. But what Andy has given is more than just fulfilling a job. He gives his whole self to us as a church and to our community and beyond. I am so grateful for the positive impact he has on our lives, stretching our faith and having such a huge influence on the lives of our children. Andy, I love your enthusiasm, your energy, your faith, your tremendous teaching capability, your father heart for our congregation, your great sense of fun, your patience, your vision, your passion, your willingness to push others out of their comfort zone, and above all, you are a great friend. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for being a great pastor.
And thank you for being enthusiastic and positive.
And thank you for all your energy and your really caring and understanding.
And for helping us to grow spiritually.
Thank you.
Some of you may not be aware that, in addition to his 30 years working for the Vine Church, Andy was also briefly employed by the Vatican. On his stag night, Andy found himself dressed in a cardinal's robes and with a fire extinguisher filled with rocks chained to his ankle. He spent the evening riding commuter-filled trains and roaming the streets of Fleet in a futile search for the key. The evening concluded with Andy cast adrift in a leaky dinghy, not on the Holy See, but on the Basingstoke Canal. Needless to say, this concluded Andy's spell in Holy Orders.
Hi Andy. Wow, we can't believe it's 30 years since you joined the Vine Church.
Yeah, I think the first time we got to know each other, Andy, was when we travelled back from the Downs Bible Week way back in 1990.
And one of my memories is when we lived in Laurel Close, a few doors away from Val, Kate and Jonathan, and noticing that you rather frequently visited the house. It didn't take us long to put two and two together.
Yeah, Andy, we love your pastoral heart, we love your sense of fun and your laugh, and we love your commitment and vision to building the church in Odium and in the surrounding area.
We hope you have a great time celebrating, and we send you loads of love. Bye!
Bye, have fun!
Well, I've been in the privileged position of working with you, Andy, and I want to thank you for your dedication, enthusiasm and stamina in leading us as a church. Your love of the Bible and the way you preach with boldness and conviction has had an impact on my faith. And as a family, we've really felt supported by you and Kate. We've enjoyed your hospitality, and you've kindly opened your home as a place of ministry. And as a parent, I'm so grateful for your input into the lives of my children. So a big thank you from me for all you do.
About 20 years ago, Felicity and I went to a somewhat more happy-clappy church than we were used to. People were friendly, they sang some good songs, but probably most important to me was that there was good, solid biblical teaching in the sermon. And that was our first introduction to Andy. As newcomers, we assumed that this was normal, but as it turned out, this was quite early in his time as leader of the church in Odium. Also, little did we know that this was to be the start of a wonderful friendship with Andy and Kate, as we have shared our lives, with our children growing together, with many Christmases and New Years spent in each other's company, as well as camping holidays, canoeing down rivers, and epic bike rides. Speaking of bike rides, probably one of the more memorable ones was one of the early ones, when Andy and I pulled up to a junction together. As I started looking for cars, I heard a yelp, and watched as Andy gently toppled to the tarmac, having forgotten to unclip his pedals. Along the way, the Le Roux have introduced us to a number of different things: camping, Dutch ovens, bell tents, and the concept of Le Roux time, a highly optimistic planning technique for squeezing as much activity into the day as possible. Andy brings this enthusiasm and optimism to his leadership of the church. He has a combination of solid biblical knowledge with an openness to God. Current reality is not the determining factor, but rather faith in God and his ability to make things happen, although not always in Le Roux time. Thanks, Andy, for your leadership and friendship, and we look forward to God blessing you as you continue to lead the church for many more years.
So once we were youth hosteling when Andy was about 14 or 15, and in the morning he said to us, oh, there was this man snoring in the night and it was really terrible, and we were just commiserating and saying, oh well, that's one of the things about youth hosteling. And he said, oh no, it wasn't a problem, I just got up and held his nose until he stopped doing it.
Hi from Perth, Bonnie, Scotland, and congratulations Andy. It's nice to be able to say a few words. I remember when you were in our house in Odium in Buffins Road 30 years ago, and you said you'd always love to have a house in that road, and here you are. You've been there much longer than we have. Can't understand why you haven't moved to Scotland though, especially with some of your ancestors coming from here. Anyway, have a lovely day.
Ta-da! What a transformation! God bless you, Andy. Congratulations. Kate, you were a lovely girl, and I just thank God for you. And Andy, if I can say, you're a lovely man. I thank you for your faith in God, your commitment to the church. Really great, and we're celebrating with you. Thank you very much. Only thing is, this water here, Andy, it reminds me when you walked on water on the canal.
I remember Arnold would sack Andy frequently, which resulted in much hilarity. He just didn't go. There was the welly boot incident, of course. It was a Monday, Arnold's day off, and Andy asked if he could borrow Arnold's boots, as he wanted to take some photos down on the canal, and it was frozen. I didn't want to bother Arnold by asking, so said yes. Later, Andy returns having fallen through the ice. Later, Arnold decided to wash the car, and was not best pleased to have canal water in his boots. Andy was indignant that Arnold was not so bothered that Andy's camera was ruined. Later, Andy was involved in planting the congregation in Fleet. Arnold wanted him to help back in Odium. It was at that time that Arnold was suddenly asked to go to Sheffield to take over leading the church there. Poor Andy was suddenly left to lead the church in Odium. You could see God's hand in the timing of it all.
Thank you for making my junior school Padres so interesting, entertaining and memorable.
Wow, 30 years working for the Vine Church, and Andy and I go back 30 years and a few more. I want to honour him. I want to say to you, I remember very early on in those 30 years, actually even before he was youth leader, I think, Arnold Bell, our previous leader, wanted to pick Andy out as an exemplar to honour his desire to come back from Sheffield, if I remember rightly, for a church meeting. Now there's a good example to follow as a leader. That's a good Christian witness, isn't it? Not just do what I say, but do what I do. He was that example that Arnold picked out in the church as someone who's really committed. So I want to say, to honour Andy today, 30 years, follow his lead, except for one thing. He is a Man United supporter, so definitely do not follow that, says he, speaking from the blue half of Manchester. Anyway, Andy, all the best. I hope you have a great time. God bless.
We first got to know you, Andy, when you were about 14 years old, in the early days of your and our Christian lives, and a few years before this picture was taken. We didn't realise at the time how prophetic it was. You impressed us then as a young man whose heart was for God and who sought to honour and obey him, even when difficult decisions had to be made. We have been blessed to see you mature into the gifted pastor and teacher that you have become today, uncompromising where the things of God are concerned, and leading your flock with grace, compassion, wisdom and good humour. We believe you to be a man after God's own heart. Many thanks to you from Brian and Carol.
Hi Andy. Well, a lot of memories, 30 years. I think my biggest one is from Winchester. Yes, you remember. And you remember how you smiled as you glided past me and stole that last piece of chocolate cake and went on to eat it. Thanks. We love you.
Hi Andy, Paul and Hazel from Nottingham. Congratulations on 30 years serving the Vine Church. It was a privilege to work with you for 10 years, from the mid-90s through to 2005. Looking back over the memories that we had and the pictures that we took, reminded us some very good times, fun days and let's go and all those good things. We also remember trying to find the far end of the Greywell Tunnel in the deep snow one Christmas. Just before, I think we played a very long
game of Titanic. Do you remember the Christmas you gave it to the family and we had an epic game and I don't think we ever finished it.
So very good wishes from us. We hope the next 30 years are as good as the last. God bless and take care.
Love from us and Simon, Matthew and Sarah.
Thank you, Andy, for all the wonderful care and nurturing we have had over the years we've been at the Vine. We can remember arriving in the UK 12 years ago and living in the country, that being Crondall, at the time. We were looking for a church and did a few searches of churches around us to find the Vine and see the minister's name, Le Roux. Well, that was a good South African name, not the usual English name, and from the first time we walked into the church we were welcomed in so warmly, and we've stayed ever since. Thank you, Andy, and your lovely family for all your love and care you have given us as a church family. May God lead and guide you in the difficult times ahead. God bless, and we look forward to all God has for us in the future. Debbie and Simon Wade. I've known Andy since he were a lad, as he would say in one of his attempts at a northern accent. I could tell you so many funny stories, but I'm not going to do that. Spoil sport, I hear you cry. Well, I had to admit that I was briefly tempted to abuse my privileged position. Should I negotiate a silence contract? I pondered. My pondering was brief, for I cannot get that word privilege out of my mind. You see, it has indeed been a privilege to watch Andy grow and mature and see his passion for God ever increasing, especially in these difficult times that we now find ourselves in. One story I will share. I was driving back from the Lake District one Sunday afternoon. The M6 was busy. I was travelling on the outside lane, overtaking a lorry which was swaying somewhat in the strong breeze. My car began to sway too, and I heard what sounded like gunfire. Glancing in my rearview mirror, I saw chunks of tyre flying across the motorway behind me, and it slowly dawned on me that they were chunks of my tyre. Somehow I managed to move across to the Hart shoulder. It was an elevated section of the motorway, and there was no safe place to stand outside of the car, so I sat and waited and prayed until the breakdown service arrived. It was nearly midnight by the time I finally turned the key in my front door, and within 5 minutes the phone began to ring. It was Andy. He had known in his heart that something was wrong, and had been praying until he knew I was safely home. Such is the heart of a pastor who leads and cares for his flock. Val Mail.